Hello and welcome to AXSChat. I'm delighted that we're joined today by Sara Faatz, who is the Director of Community Relations at Progress. Sara is, and I'm really jealous about this, joining us from a boat off the coast of Florida. Why would I be jealous of that, I wonder, being in the rainy UK? So, Sara, thank you so much for joining us today. We were just talking before we came on air about the work that you've been doing and your focus on usability and human-centric software and services and so on. So please tell us a bit more about who you are and the work that you're doing.
Absolutely.
And welcome.
Thank you. And thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here. This is a topic that is not only important to Progress, but it's near and dear to my heart. And Progress is a software company that's been around for 40 plus years. And we help organizations develop, deploy, and manage responsible AI-powered applications and experiences. So, and the responsible word, I think, is really important there, right? Because that goes beyond just what we think about from an AI perspective. It goes to what we do and how we deliver software in general, and what we enable our customers to do. I had mentioned earlier before, one of my favorite things to say is humans use software. And that might sound, like it might be the Captain Obvious statement of the day, but it's true. And as technologists, we sometimes forget that, right? We get very excited about what technology can do, and we forget that there are people behind it. So we put together a study back in the spring to find out what people are thinking about, how they're viewing human-centric software, and the importance. So we interviewed more than 700 application developers and IT decision makers from organizations all over the world, and what it showed was amazing, that 98% believe that human-centric software is important. But the hard part, the sad part, and where we have a lot of work to do, is that only 34% of them are actually doing something today to fix that. And there are a lot of reasons behind that. But to me, at least, it was helpful to know that they at least believe. That's a good step in the right direction, that we really need to be thinking about software and the humans who are using it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think that we frequently see people believing that something is useful and worthwhile, and then we have the implementation gap, if you like, between belief that something might be good and people actually getting off their behinds and doing something about it. And I think that we really see that gap in the accessibility space. I know Deborah's got a question, so I'll hand it.
Yeah, and Sara, welcome to the program. We were really
thank you.
I know that when your team sent me what you are doing, I was very impressed. But also, before we got on air, as we were talking, one thing that we see, you were talking a little bit about, what happened during the pandemic. And I just thought those were some really good points. And I was wondering if maybe you would just talk a little bit more about, because I know that also influenced what y'all did. So maybe you could just talk a little bit about that. The audience would enjoy that.
Yeah, absolutely. So, during the pandemic, we had apps that had previously been used for convenience all of a sudden became apps of necessity, right? We couldn't go necessarily to the store and spend time there to pick up our groceries, right? So you ordered online, medication, doctor's visits, all of those things. And since then, our reliance on technology has just skyrocketed, right? That we're not looking back from that. And people expect to be able to have these seamless digital experiences that replicate what they could have in real life. But with that, it becomes incredibly important that we actually are making those apps accessible for everyone, right? And you can look at the number of studies. I think the UN says 1 in 6 people has some sort of impairment. They're all different numbers out there.
Yes.
I would argue that every single human on the face of this earth will have some sort of an impairment at some point in their life, permanent or temporary. And that could mean even something as simple as breaking your arm, and you can no longer, type with your dominant hand, right? And that might not seem, that's critical in the moment, right? So we need to be thinking about how are the applications we're building, how are they accessible to every single person who needs to use them? Because there is, again, that intersection between life and digital, and they're blurring.
Right. And humans are using your applications. Humans are using your applications, and we know how to make things fully accessible for all humans.
Right.
We just, for whatever reason, do not do it.
Right.
And society needs to care about all humans. And it's just really interesting to watch us continually to be in denial about this. And so, and that's one reason why we do AXSChat. We're in our 10th year in AXSChat. And the 3 hosts, we foolishly were saying, oh, I'm sure they won't do this for a couple of years and we'll run out of topics. Yeah. So I'm sure we will all be doing this till the end of our lives, and then hopefully others will come in. But the reality is we must stop designing things that do not work for humans, designing buildings, designing software, designing websites, designing AI. I mean, yeah. And so I really appreciate that y'all took the time to do this study, because we find that there's continued, people are continued to not do this. Some of our findings are chilling because we're making progress. And then I just heard, which I won't say, of a very large global company that is just about to put out something that millions and millions and millions of people use, and it's not accessible. They've been accessible in the past, but for some reason they forgot how to do accessibility, and it's a major company. So we're hoping that we're going to discourage them enough that they're going to go ahead and include humans. But I also want to say something, Sarah, and then I'm going to turn it over to Antonio or Neil. But also what you were saying, you were using the word impairment. I just think that we're biological creatures, and sometimes we can see and sometimes we can't, and sometimes we can hear and sometimes we can't. Sometimes we can partially hear. Sometimes I just wish we would stop saying, well, you should include them because of this. You should include them because they are a human.
Right.
And why would we build anything that hurts our planet or hurts humans?
Right. Well, the amazing thing there is, if you think about it, if I'm building for everyone, I am making that user experience. Even if I'm building for the person who has vision issues or has auditory problems, I'm actually making it a better user experience for everybody, right? And so if you start there, if you think about that, it's the hard part is, and this is my battle cry for software developers, let's start with an accessibility mindset first, right? If you think about accessibility in the application development process, right, early on, and if we start teaching developers to think about that, it's really not that difficult to implement. Where it's a challenge is to retrofit, right? That becomes very difficult. There's a tool that my daughter just graduated from high school, but the county school district had a portal where I could go in and I could look at her grades. And they have an accessibility button that you can click to say that you need support with something. The problem is that button covered I could move it 4 different places, and every place I moved it covered something of function. So right there, their part was in the right place, but their implementation was very, very poor. And part of that is because it's retrofitting, right? But then modernization of applications is messy. So it's a complicated, it's complicated right now, but it doesn't mean that it's not the right thing for us to be doing.
Agree.
And that also brings another question. The example that you've provided is procurement, and how important it is in that case. How important it is for schools when they are buying or reaching out to new service providers to make sure that they're able to buy solutions or choose solutions that are accessible. In this case that you mentioned, for the families and for the students.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. And again, I think it's about education in a lot of ways. I mean, I think that initially people talked about accessibility because there are laws, right? And tried to scare people into, from an app dev perspective, just following the laws because there are going to be fines. What I don't think that our industry was good at was really helping developers and organizations understand empathetic side and the actual value to having that available, right? And so it's I think I read a study, I want to say it was in Forbes, 78% of all people will leave a site that they cannot access in some capacity, whether it's visual or auditory. And if you think about that, right, that is a massive number of people that you're losing because you weren't able to think ahead and say, oh, you know what, I need to make sure that I have a way for everybody, for all humans, to access this.
And today, many of us use a mobile device.
Yes.
Where sometimes things are very tiny, you can't read. The experience can, and sometimes we might be tired at the end of the day. So we talk about this. We were hopeful that people in marketing and sales would understand that if you make life easier for everyone, you can increase sales.
Right. Yeah. Right. Absolutely.
So this is the thing about accessibility and design. This is about communication. If you don't design it well, you're not communicating. And Antonio and I work for a really large IT service provider and integrator, and some of the things we do are like run help desks, and actually everybody's been, over the last decade or so, and particularly since COVID, has been trying to sort of get people onto bots or to avoid having to ring up on the call center.
Right.
And sometimes you as a human don't want to ring the call center, you want to avoid it, but at the same time, if you don't design it right, actually the default is to go back to the call center, and every time that someone calls that call center, there's an additional cost, and actually the cost of each one of those calls is several dollars, right? It's not a small amount of money. So when you start, rather than, sometimes you have to frame your arguments for this depending on your audience, and sometimes altruism and doing what's good for humanity is not the argument that will win through, but the fact that if you don't do this, it's going to double your call center costs. Right. That can have an impact, and it's the same actually with the awful quality of the process for booking an appointment at my local doctor's. Right, it's so bad that I pretty much guarantee that no person over the age of 60 will be able to complete the online process of booking an appointment. Right. Because it's so confusing. Right. I'm technology literate. My wife's technology literate. We still end up ringing the doctor. Right. Because the thing doesn't work and it's not designed well. It's not even that it's inaccessible, which I can assure you it's also. It's cognitively inaccessible. It's completely unusable. Right. And so, not only is it costing them more money in terms of bad design, it's possibly damaging people's health. Well, quite likely to be damaging people's health, because they either give up or are having to wait, and they're getting delays in terms of being seen for medical care and stuff like this. Right, absolutely. So, I mean, design is actually crucially important, and inclusive design and good, clear design in critical applications like you mentioned. Right. Can be the difference between health and sickness, life and death in certain circles. Absolutely. Yeah, and in a situation like that, obviously user testing wasn't done, or user testing wasn't done well, because those are the things, there's no excuse for that. And I think that there's so many different ways to test an application, right? And I think people, developers in particular, are guilty of sometimes saying, oh, you know what, checked all the boxes, we're good to go, without, again, thinking about the human at the other end. There's a great book that was about website design, but it's called Don't Make Me Think. And it's Stephen Krug wrote it, and it's super short, very easy read, which you would hope with a book like that. But it really talks about and addresses the fact that your digital interactions should not make people think. Talking about, trying to make an appointment, there are things, that everybody should be thinking about when they're creating forms, as an example. Is the form field long enough? We have a lot of people
now who have hyphenated last names, right? Do you have enough character spaces there? Have you given enough time for somebody to fill in a form? If somebody's making an appointment to go see a doctor, there is a very good chance that they are suffering from some sort of ailment or impairment in the moment, right? Have you given them enough time? And those are the kinds of things that, it goes back to knowing your audience. But if you also understand that your audience is humans, you're going to have, you'll take those types of things into consideration.
And also with the prevalence of services going online, or from utilities. So if you choose your provider online, if you decide to receive your bills by email, you can save money. So if you are not able to do some of the tasks online, you end up being excluded, and you end up spending more money. So I think that's also an important factor, and there are studies on that area as well.
Absolutely. I mean, inclusive design, whether it's, of an application, is, accessibility is one part of that, right? Inclusive design is also a huge topic, right? And something that we should all be considering. And that's language. That's all of those things. It's economic ability. It's access to technology. All of those things. Yeah.
And I would also say that I think something that happens very frequently is that whenever developers don't take the time to include us, when somebody is struggling to do it, whatever they're trying to do, make an appointment, get access to something really important, it makes the person feel like something's wrong with them. Exactly. And we know it does, and that's really bad. Right. Because so many people are in trouble. We're having suicide rates, and just saying to the developers, not putting this all on you, but the reality is you make this so hard for us to get access. It just hurts people. It hurts people in ways we don't even understand. Right. But and so it's a really huge issue. But Sara, do you mind telling us more about the study and the findings and excuse me? How has it been accepted? I know when y'all sent it to me, I was like, wow, I had no idea. So, but do you mind just explaining? We definitely want to make sure our audience can get access to the information. And but I was just wondering if you'd spend a little time on that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll make sure you have a link to easily download it. But, so I think if you view it in the aggregate, what we found was that, as I mentioned before, organizations know it's important, but they're having a hard time understanding how they can implement it, or even just fitting it into their business model, right? Because in a lot of cases, it means, those barriers to development are things like, how do you meet your customers' demands? This is the ironic thing. How do you meet your current customer demands while adding this to your development process, right? So it to a certain extent, it comes down to prioritization, but it also comes down to, hey, I need to deliver this new feature or this new functionality. Do I have time, right? And that's an ethical conversation, but that's also a business conversation long term. You need those champions internally. It also is access to its complexity, right? Lack of agility in the development process, probably a legacy application, but also lack of in-house skills, right? So that is something that we as an industry need to address. It's something that we have probably more than 50 articles on our blogs currently about accessibility and how you can, tools and information about how to create accessible applications. There's information out there, but as I said before, this battle cry needs to be that we need to be thinking about accessibility first. So that's one thing. But again, it also means, for the second piece that we kind of got out of the entire survey, was that human centricity means thinking about both the overall digital experience and the application development itself, right? So when you think about, you had mentioned your phone. We all have most everybody has a mobile phone on them. A lot of us have wearables, right? Your watch. A lot of times, and we access applications, we access websites. A lot of times those digital experiences were built in silos and they were built separately. And as everybody started 20 years ago with a website, and then, I can put that on a phone. I need to put this in, make it accessible, the content accessible in other ways. And so that strategy is sometimes very siloed for each one of those applications. So thinking about that from a broader perspective is something, it requires people to stop and think, right? And so that is a challenge for a lot of people. And then finally, just, I mentioned it before in the training, but normalizing human-centric applications. That is something, and again, it's something that I think we're only going to do through awareness, through podcasts like this and other pieces of information, and organizations stepping up and saying, again, this is how we need to lead the charge moving forward. If we are going to be a digital first society, then we need to make sure that everybody has access.
I agree. I know that Neil did something that I thought really helped one of the items that you talked about. Now, Neil to come in, but also just want to comment real quickly that accessibility should be considered as seriously as privacy and security.
Absolutely.
Yeah, Neil?
I agree.
Yeah. So, and I hope that we'll get there, right? And on the other hand, we still know that companies forget privacy and they forget security too. So, there's a lot of work that we need to do. And I take your point about silos. In terms of the skilling piece, we need people to get better and understand accessibility better, and to understand that it's everybody's job.
Yes.
But there's also a room for specialists as well. So it's not either or. I think there's always going to be need for subject matter expertise, and we need more accessibility experts. And so some of the work that we've done within our own organisation and then wider was we led the work to create an apprenticeship standard for digital accessibility specialists in the UK, which is open source. And I'm encouraging various different countries and universities and education providers to pick this up and run with it, because it's a framework for skills, knowledge, skills, behaviours, competencies, etc. We started this a few years ago. These kind of things, especially when you're working with government, take a long time to come to fruition. But I was looking back the other day, and we were going, well, we've got two education providers doing it, and then I actually found there are 7 now. So there are 7 colleges and universities offering this course now, so people can get a professional qualification. What it also means is the government has recognised it as an occupation in this. So then it means that it gets into the sort of planning framework and skills framework for government at a national level, and it percolates both down into the skills that kids have to learn and up into sort of job framework. So the UK civil service have then actually created accessibility job specialist job descriptions and stuff like this, and so it becomes a civil service job framework as well as an educational framework. So there you've got some seeding of accessibility and embedding stuff. And when you were talking about the silos and the legacy of code and stuff, we're not going to solve that quickly, right? This is something that you need. These are systemic issues. So
Absolutely.
the sort of approach we were taking with apprenticeships is kind of hopefully building systems that can remediate this and improve things in the future. Right. But I do think that by getting people into the mindset of thinking about people before they start developing the specs, it's discussing it right from the beginning, understanding what problem they're trying to solve, and really building the sort of a broad set of personas and understandings of how people might use this. So the user journeys are going to be different, even if the end results that they wish to achieve and the problem they need to solve is going to be the same, can help in terms of how you architect something before you start coding it.
Exactly.
Because once you started coding, it's kind of too late, right? Because the costs go up exponentially, right?
Right.
We know from our own experience of having to fix stuff where people forgot, it can be more than the entire cost of the original project.
Absolutely. Yeah, so, I mean, user testing prior to development is critical. but you also should be doing that user testing afterwards, even if there are, yes, retrofitting is incredibly expensive and it's a challenge, but there may be some tweaks that you could make. There could be some minor things that you could do. Yeah.
Absolutely. So we are now, we're in an agile development world, right? So it's not like products are static anymore.
Right.
So then it's, actually accessibility and usability and human centricity needs to be part of every single sprint.
Right.
And so there will be incremental improvements that you can do. And what we need to make sure is that accessibility isn't in the backlog all the time. Because that's the thing, you will always have items in the backlog and things that don't get fixed this time because of the financial priorities or because of the expediencies of speed or whatever needs to happen. Maybe you've got a critical security issue you need to fix.
Right.
You know what? Yeah, you're going to ship that without accessibility because you have to. But you shouldn't leave the accessibility in the backlog, and accessibility issues are bugs, right?
Absolutely.
They are bugs, right? And that is something that people shouldn't treat them as something that isn't a bug.
Right.
Because
totally agree. Yeah, if it's part of your design spec, if it's part of your application spec, then it's built in, and you're right, it can be featured, impacted or treated like a bug and taken care of from there. We found, it's interesting. The survey showed us where people see the benefits of human-centric design, and there is a business. They do see business value in it. So that's the interesting thing to me, right? That we still are in a world where 98% say they understand we should be doing it, but only 34% are. When you have, they say customer appeal, increased market opportunity, right? Things like positive financial results. Those are the kinds of things from a business perspective that if you're thinking about what often drives those decisions from a development perspective, we need to get those numbers in front of more people, right? So they understand this is, 54% say that they have enhanced digital trust when they have a human-centric application, right? Think about that. And if what we're saying is, and if we can all agree that we are leaning more digital in our engagements than ever before, that is a huge number, right?
I agree.
Yeah. So, Antonio commented before a little bit on cost, but I think so I'm really interested to understand. So if your respondents understand that there are benefits, why is it that they're not acting on it? Is it because in the development community, in the IT community, we are fixated on cost rather than value? Do you think that there is a cultural issue that we need to address it?
Yeah, I think it doesn't show. One of the things we said, the highest highest rated challenge that people had was managing or meeting customer demands. So they're not seeing it, which is ironic. Again, I think they believe that their time and their prioritization is around specific features or functionality within an existing application, as opposed to having this. It's almost like a silent bug, right? And to a certain extent, right? Because they don't necessarily. There are people who will try to come to your application or your website to use it and never come back again, and you might not ever know that, right? There are tools to talk about, people drop-off rates and things like that, but truly understanding who's coming and who's leaving is very difficult, right? So I think that until you can quantify that as a feature that needs to be fixed, right, it's very hard to get that into the backlog. And then, complexity and lack of agility in the application development process. That was the second-rated challenge that people have and why they're not doing it. So I think if we can, I love the apprenticeship. I think if we can continue to provide educational resources and upskilling across the board, so people understand that this is what they need to be thinking about. I feel like this is, if people take baby steps particularly in legacy applications and chip away at things, even if it's slowly, it's at least a step in the right direction. And then all new applications or websites that are created should be thought of with an accessibility first mindset.
Yeah, absolutely. We have a moral responsibility to that.
Yep.
And at the same time, I agree, progress is better than doing nothing.
Yep.
So for those legacy apps, some improvement is better than just going, it's too hard. So thank you so much for spending time with us today. We've reached the end of our half hour. It's flown by. I just want to thank Amazon for sponsoring us and supporting us, MyClearText for keeping us captioned and accessible. Your support is really important to us, and so is the support of our community. So thank you, Sarah. It's been a great pleasure to talk.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you very much.